Welcome to it, the Sunday morning edition of the Average Joe Sports Show, live and in color for you. That is Bill Doleman, Gary Sharp, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Like and subscribe to the Average Joe Sports Show on YouTube, also Spotify and iTunes, where you can go to download and give us a review. Fellas, Nebraska 3-0. Nebraska a winner 34-3 over Northern Iowa. On to Illinois. We have some quick reaction to last night, and a lot of us are part of post-game reaction thoughts. And, I'm just going to put my hand up here first. I was probably a little grumpy last night with how things looked. I mean, 34-3 was a number I think a lot of Nebraska fans are comfortable with, guys. But you just don't see – you saw efficiency, but maybe you just haven't seen a second half of where it's kind of clicking on all cylinders. There's still work to do, but this is a spot a lot of Nebraska fans haven't been in a while, where it's okay to whine or complain about what isn't going wrong because so much is going right.
I agree with you. I wouldn't say whine or complain because I don't think we deserve that yet. Embrace that they're 3-0.
Yeah.
Last night was just Northern Iowa impacted a lot of the vibe of last night, and they lost by 31 points. Remember, good teams win, great teams cover, elite teams cover with a second string quarterback, which happened last night. But I think the style, remember when Nebraska went to USC in 2006, and the game plan was to shorten the game and not make it a game where it could get out of hand. You knew you weren't going to win. Callahan knew that he wasn't going to win against USC. You didn't want that game to get out of hand. So you had a game plan that kept the game in a phone booth and didn't make it a runaway freight train. And remember how we felt like on that end, you were like, smart play. Yeah, I feel like I got screwed. I went out to LA and you guys didn't really want to play. Northern Iowa kind of utilized that style last night, and the possessions were super low. I mean, Nebraska's offense was efficient. Their defense showed you that for the first time in a while. But I think you need to go, Nebraska's 3-0. There's still a lot of stuff in front of them, and they have some things that they can get better on, but it's not anything glaring where you go, uh-oh, this is fool's gold.
And that was one of the final thoughts on my show yesterday is struggling against teams that you should be able to go out and beat pretty handily has been a theme among the top 25 in college football this year. That is not an issue that's unique to Nebraska. And I think Nebraska can even look at across the country and say, well, not many other teams that struggled with their opposition got a 31-point win and cover. Like you look at Oregon, they struggled their first 2 weeks of the season. Penn State struggled against Bowling Green. We had Oklahoma struggle against Tulane yesterday. Go up and down the top 25. Look at how a lot of those teams performed against quote unquote lesser opposition. You'll see a lot of teams in the country have things they need to work on. I'm not trying to minimize some of the issues that need to be cleaned up for Nebraska because there are, I think, plenty of issues that Nebraska needs to clean up by Friday and as they get into the meat of their Big Ten schedule. But you have these games early in the season against teams like Northern Iowa, so you can clean things up before a team like Illinois comes to town. And yeah, there's things for Nebraska to clean up, but upon sleeping on last night's result, seeing some more stuff from the game, I'm like, you know what? It wasn't a bad result for Nebraska. Was not perfect, was not clean, but 31-point victories are hard to come by in college football, especially when your defense only gives up 3. I don't care who you're playing. That's not easy to do.
Look, Nebraska has had some games in the last 20 years where they have played directional, hyphenated secondary state schools and eked out wins or not. I think of South Alabama, Northern Illinois, Arkansas State, or Georgia Southern.
Are you going to start singing?
Which sent Nebraska on a completely different trajectory when struggling against these types of schools. I mean, think back. There was a game in doubt with Arkansas State. There was one with South Alabama. And granted, Northern Iowa is FCS, but I said last night on McNeese State. I said this on Schmidt's show last night that I thought that's the best team Nebraska's played so far because they're well coached. They came out with a game plan. They executed it. And I think, look, I'm sure Matt Rule is very happy with the win. Of course he is. But I also think he's happy that he can get their attention this morning by saying, let's look at the first 10 minutes of their offensive possessions and show what they did to Nebraska's black shirts marching down the field for a 10-minute drive that resulted in 3 points and not 7. But there's enough that happened last night that you get their attention today, especially on a short week. So, a 31-point win, winning the way you're supposed to. Gary, you said good teams win, great teams cover, and teams that make you go, cover with backup kickers who sneak in extra points when you're a 30.5 favorite. But anyway, I digress.
Hey, there was a guy that when I left the stadium last night, there was a guy who came out of the Champions Club, and he said some dude won $80,000 on the spread. I'm like, what was that guy thinking when Northern Iowa had the ball on 4th and goal? And he must have been so excited for Mark Farley when they ran that play, which didn't make sense. If you think about you and I trying to score there at the end, that play didn't make sense. Yeah, this guy said, some guy in the Champions Club is showing people his receipt that he won $80,000. And I'm like, who in the frig has $80,000 to spend on a Northern Iowa Nebraska game? I mean, you got way too much money, bro.
That's
Gary, you ask what's going through that guy's head on 4th and goal. That's what keeps those guys coming back for more. You got to dive into the gambler's mind.
How about when the backup kicker comes in and sneaks one in the right upright to make it a 31-point game?
I've got a better question, Sharpie. Did you make contact with the guy coming out of the Champions Club? And next time, make sure this fella points out our rich friend. Friend,
yes,
that is ballsy with his disposable income.
Ken, I think a couple of things that we've all said here to start this show off, and thank you. I mean, there's so many people in the stream, and they were in the stream before we even started. It was a very immature team. That game is attention convention for 4 quarters last night. Nebraska on defense, they didn't play up to their standard, even though they only gave up 3. They just didn't look like what Nebraska's supposed to look like. I think a young, immature team really struggles in that because the vibe in Lincoln yesterday, the vibe in the stadium, even though it was packed, kudos to the fans. There were not empty seats last night. You mess around with that game, but I never felt like Nebraska was in trouble last night, if that makes sense. It was just Northern Iowa had a really good game plan for how to attack that. How to play a game like that when you're a decided underdog, but yet you're physical and you're going to stick to your guns. I think also, guys, Nebraska defensively was thrown off. We would have never thought Northern Iowa was going to throw the ball 25 times last night. So they did a couple of things that Nebraska really had not repped for. But listen, you benched your starting right guard. You had one of your top defensive players was injured, didn't play. You rotated a lot of guys, especially on defense. You'll take it any day. 34-3, move on. And now you have the understanding that it gets tougher because now the appetizer is over. You slid it away. The waitress has come and picked it up, or waiter. And now it's time for the main course where you will be judged on, where you're going this season. So I know a lot of people are, they're like, okay, is it okay to nitpick or whatever? No, it's okay. The Nebraska's 3-0 to go, okay, you know what? That didn't work out so well. But as Elijah said, losing is easy, winning is hard. And I look around college football, and there's a lot of teams that might be 3-0, and they have danced with their partner during the game. Guys, Nebraska hasn't really been in trouble in 3 games.
No, they've been the better team. They've been the team that comes out and is able to do the efficiency. I thought Rule nailed this last night. 3 drives, 21 points, and it was 19 plays. I mean, they were locked in with what they wanted to do, and it was really fun to watch your freshman quarterback at one point be 13 of 15 for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, just asking for a scalpel like he's in the operating room. He's just so gifted. It was nice to see Dowdell break one off. It was nice to see Emmett come in and close out a little bit. So My biggest hurdle right now is trying to apply what I've seen in the non-conference and apply it to what is subtly looking like more of a dangerous Big Ten schedule. Illinois is going to come in ranked. Indiana should be undefeated. If Nebraska can handle their business, that's a future ranked matchup. I don't know how good Indiana is, but I don't know how good Nebraska is. I know how good Nebraska's quarterback is, and I think I know how good Nebraska's defense is. But Sharpie, I don't know how good Nebraska's run game is right now. That's my big takeaway, Bill and Elijah as well.
What'd you make him
trying,
mad? Oh, there he is.
Is trying to figure out where Nebraska's run game is at, because I think when push comes to shove, you're going to have to be able to be really good at that and not put it all on your quarterback, as good as he is, to go winning some ball games. Can you continue to be a balanced offense moving forward?
Doesn't they seem to be a situational offense?
Yeah.
Like last night, the pass was there.
Sure.
I mean,
they took what they could.
Yeah, and they kind of did that against UTEP, and for the most part, they did it against Colorado. I know we'd all like to say, "Hey, well, impose your will." I think through 3 games, guys, and they still are who I thought they were, and I predicted 7-5 at the beginning of the season. They're not overthinking things. Like Satterfield got into his bag early in that game with the variety of things that they were running. I mean, last night they ran a trap. They ran what else? They ran out of the I formation. They had Harburg involved in a couple of packages. I just think they're not overthinking things. That is pretty easy when you have a quarterback like Raiola. I don't know. I think they put a lot of stuff on tape, guys, for their opponents for the first 3 games that you can't just show up and play Nebraska. You got to think about playing Nebraska. And I don't know. That's when you have the variety of weapons they have on offense, and with a very salty defense that when they're humming, they're really good. I don't know. I think they're in a good spot. They're where they should be, because imagine the other part of this. If we're getting ready for Illinois, Bill and Elijah, and they're 2-1, and we're like, well, maybe they're not as good as we thought. Well, they haven't played as good as we think they can play, and they're 3-0.
Well, if they were 3-0 with a 23-17 win over UTEP, and it's probably justifiable to have a close game over Colorado, maybe a 21-20, something like that. And then if you'd struggled yesterday, oh yeah, they're 3-0, but they've won by a combined, 10 points or something like that. I think there'd be much more cause for concern. But what is this? What did I see? 9 straight games with 14 or fewer points allowed at home by that defense. So we know that there's consistency there, despite what happened on that opening drive. I think that opening drive for you and I, again, gives Matt Rule and Tony White something to talk about and to focus for this morning. You look on the other side of the ledger. Illinois is going to come in, and they've got 3 wins. 45-0 over Eastern Illinois. They've got the come from behind win over Kansas, and then they had a pedestrian win yesterday over Central Michigan, highlighted by a 59-yard field goal. So that gives Nebraska something to think about. So I think both of these teams coming up have had maybe similar seasons, but maybe we know a little bit more about Nebraska because that defense has been so stout that it can score some points, that maybe Illinois is still in its learning process at this point in the season. But if Nebraska had been eking out 3 wins, I think there'd be cause for concern, and the 3-0 would be fool's gold. I don't think it's fool's gold right now.
That being said, there are some things that concern me. Maybe we'll get back into these. You want to get into them now? There was something that Coach Farley said.
I want to hear the concerns.
Well, first off, I'm going to make this a sandwich. We're going to go nice, concern, nice. With the Husker offense, I think the running game looks great. And I think Dylan Raiola looks great when he's going against zone coverage. But there was something, we're going to go ghetto style with this because I pulled the soundbite. And I want to get your guys' thoughts if you are concerned about this. We're going to, let's see, put it right into the mic. Coach Farley postgame.
We went man-to-man coverage on him. We felt really good that I didn't know if we could cover him. We could cover him. That's when things changed.
You guys hear that?
Yeah. I didn't know if we could cover him, but we could cover him.
And if you watch after halftime, if you watch, Nebraska's receivers generate a hell of a lot less separation against Northern Iowa defenders than you would like them to. There's that one throw where everyone's talking. It was low and outside, Dylan Raiola across the middle of the field to Jamal Banks with a UNI defender all over his back after they went man coverage. There's a noted change at halftime with how much separation Nebraska's wide receivers get. And you go, I don't know, you would think a Power 5 group of wide receivers be able to do more against Northern Iowa and man coverage. Dylan Raiola's done great against zone coverage. I still have my doubts about the wide receivers. Illinois has got a strong secondary. If they can go man against Nebraska's wide receivers and cover them well, I start having some concerns. That being said, I think Nebraska has some counter punches that they could go to. You saw them going deep to Lloyd once they went man coverage in that one, and Matt Rule talked about, that's the play we need to make. We need to go long. I think there are counter punches we haven't necessarily seen from Nebraska, but I do have some concerns about how teams are going to game plan that. But at the end of the day, I do have faith, to finish off on a good note, that Dylan Raiola is going to be able to diagnose that and figure that out as the season goes on. He is calm and poised in the pocket, hasn't had to face a lot of man coverage. Still early in his career, only 3 games in. As he gets to see that more and more, does he become more comfortable against man coverage? It's possible, but I do have some concerns with that Husker wide receiver room, their ability to generate separation for a freshman quarterback.
They are too talented and too deep to not win one-on-ones. There's a bunch of physical specimens, right? That's your funeral. You want to play X, Y, and Z man. Well, if you get your hands on somebody and get physical, maybe Nebraska's wide receiver room doesn't like that up close and personal attention. And that's something they've got to work on. I mean, I look at Nebraska's weapons, look at Barney, that is just good luck trying to corral him. He is such a 0 to 60 big play waiting to happen. But Nayor had a nice catch and touchdown. He had a touchdown last night, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. It's a blur. But I'm anxious to see kind of Banks in Big Ten play. And Sharpie, Lloyd continues to be a nightmare. I mean, 59-yard, grab last night. So I love that point, Elijah. Good find with Northern Iowa.
And that's been a concern for 3 games. Is just the separation at the line of scrimmage, route running, perimeter blocking. It was okay last night. I mean, these are all issues that have been there. I also wonder this, because you brought up Jalen Lloyd, Schmitty. And it was if it was any other quarterback except for Raiola, we would say, hey, just throw it. Lloyd is down there somewhere. But it was great recognition to keep his head up in Raiola in the scramble, and he knew where Lloyd was down the field to throw it down there. I wonder if there is part of where, as a wide receiver, and I don't know, because you guys know my physical stature, I never played wide receiver, is if you get a little bit lazy because you have Dylan, because even if you can't win a one-on-one battle at the line of scrimmage, and maybe you've got a guy that's in your hip pocket trailing you down the field, Dylan's going to make a throw that is a 50-50 ball. Maybe I just win the 50-50 ball. Well, I mean, that's not going to work against everybody. And I think there's sometimes where he's so good at quarterback and where he places the ball for the vast majority of the time that as a wide receiver, you're like, okay, if I just do this instead of winning off the line of scrimmage. I'm glad that Mark Farley last night, he brought up a couple other things that they tried to do against Nebraska that are, if you're Nebraska, you're listening closely and you're like, yeah, we know it, or we're going to work on it. But I'm glad he brought that up, because guys, that's 3 weeks, and that's the same issue with this team. And I don't know if Nebraska physically at the line of scrimmage is going to change this over the course of this season with their top wide receivers.
Well, I mean, I don't want to be too dramatic here, because the game was pretty much in hand at halftime. But whenever they make the change at halftime into man coverage, Dylan Raiola first half, 13 of 16, 209 yards, 2 touchdowns. In the second half, which was limited, to be fair, 3 of 7 for 38 yards, 0 touchdowns. Completely different. And I know the game plan probably changes offensively whenever you get into halftime and you have that comfortable lead. I mean, you're only throwing the ball 7 times after halftime. It's a limited sample size, so maybe I'm being dramatic. But you see, whenever you go back and rewatch that third quarter when Raiola's in, less and less separation, the windows become tighter, you're going to have some salty Big Ten secondaries that you go up against. You're starting with Illinois on Friday night. If Illinois can go man coverage on Nebraska all night on Friday night and blanket those wide receivers, oh man, Nebraska could be in for a long one. If they're getting the level of separation against you and I that I saw last night, ramped up against Illinois, you're not going to have much separation. You got to be better there.
They're going to face defenses that are a lot more athletic all across the board, not just in the secondary against receivers that may be underperforming in some way, shape, or another, but along the defensive front and linebackers. So the ground game that's getting 4, maybe 5 yards per carry, and not much more than that. We're not seeing a lot of pops for 7 to 14 yards. For the most part, when Nebraska runs the ball, they're getting 4 and 5. Okay, that moves the chains if you do it 3 in a row. But they're not turning out big yards in the ground game just yet. But they're going to be facing defenses that are better coached and have better athletes, and that's why to be 3-0 the way they've done it is significant. To struggle to get to 3-0, that would be a really bad thing going in to Big Ten play. And other coaches are going to have the same. Brett Bielema was probably talking about the same thing. As I mentioned, their schedule: Eastern and Central and Kansas, and they're 3-0. But they're going to go, look, we're going to face a much different animal on Friday than we've seen so far. The same thing with Rutgers. And Purdue's going to go, oh, my God, look what happened to us yesterday. And that's Nebraska's first road game. But, look, Nebraska's given other teams enough to be concerned with, that he's not just a typical freshman quarterback, that they do have speed at receiver. And if you're not going to blanket him, you're going to get burned. Now, Barney, they list him at 160. Got to be 145 or something. He's going to get he takes a shot, man. And that shot he took in the end zone and he popped right back up. He gets popped 2 or 3 times a game, I think. And I think he's not going to get up, and he does. But Nebraska's done enough, I think, to where teams are going to have to amp up their game too when they come to Lincoln, certainly like Illinois and Rutgers.
It's the Average Joe Sports Show breakfast edition. We love jumping on here to give thoughts about Nebraska's latest win, and that's pretty awesome to say in 2024. 10:30 on Sundays. Bill Doleman, Gary Sharp.
The definitive Sunday morning podcast that begins at 10:30, talking Huskers and college football. I mean, I don't know what else.
The definitive
podcast. One of one.
Well,
yeah.
Yes.
Hey, let me
Elijah Herbel, Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Chris Schmidt. Subscribe on YouTube. Watch on YouTube. The Average Joe Sports Show. Like and subscribe also on Spotify and iTunes for the pod download. I got to get to the stream shout out sooner rather than later. We got a bunch of folks that were in. Junior and I missed church. We had plans to go
you guys
this
don't
morning.
go to church. It's such a okay.
Well, what now?
Nothing. Continue on. Love you long time. Nebraska's an 8.5-point favorite. Continue on.
Okay,
Illinois.
Well, that's where I was going to go next. Was gambling and prostitution. I mean,
but while we give
sometimes they're linked.
While we give a shout out to those in the stream, let's say thank you to you, the subscriber, you watching. We've hit 500 this week. Next stop, 1,000. We do thank everyone for subscribing. We appreciate you guys. We couldn't do it without you guys. So thank you for hitting the subscribe button. Thank you for hitting the like button. Thank you for being with us here on a Sunday morning. We hope you're having a fun time, because we are.
See, Sharpie, you nailed it. Love you long time. Thank you for subscribing and checking us out. Dion is in. Charles here. Mr. Snitley, Jeff Snitley says, good morning. 3-0 on to Illinois. Charles in. Justin here. Yeah, the Brian, Crazy Spider Adventures. I love this. And it was kind of born yesterday. Elijah's Soups trainer.
Hey, who is this?
I don't know, but it's like the Pringles mustache. That's funny.
I don't know who that could be.
The other Elijah. At least there's no feet requests in this chat.
You put that out there. You shouldn't have put that out there.
Wow.
Rule of the day. Bird has a hot wife, says Tiger Shark Diver. I'll give him that. He's talking about Coach Bielema. Michael's in. Stank Nooner said, where's the beef? Don't know. But some more shout outs. Pretty good. Yeah, this is funny. Brian Snitley asked, did anyone else have a heart attack when Raiola tried cutting back into the red zone and the turf about took his ankle or knee? That was interesting. How about Nebraska? How about Raiola carrying the football, Sharpie?
You know what? I thought he didn't have any speed. He
No,
has sneaky
motor's all
smart
right.
speed, but they ran the naked boot. When he runs, he's a smart runner. I think one thing I've noticed is you can tell he's from the school of quarterbacking. He always plays with his head up. He very rarely drops his head, even when he runs. Like he's always surveying the field. It's quite impressive to watch a young quarterback like him operate because, again, it's a quarterback playing quarterback. He has such poise, and it's never like, man, you're nervous because he's back there and you have no idea what he's going to do. He's always a guy that when the ball is snapped, he has a plan. I want to go back to something. If you guys just looked at the box score from last night and didn't watch the game, I wonder what your impression would be of the game, and then watch the game but didn't look at the box score, because Nebraska only ran 48 plays last night, which is wild. To win 34-3, that's called efficiency, but you only ran 48 plays. Northern Iowa ran 71, and 16 of those were on that opening drive. That was only a field goal. Nebraska was pretty good defensively in the red zone. Northern Iowa was only there twice, and they got the field goal, and Nebraska was a perfect 4 for 4. Nebraska they weren't real good getting off the field on third down and some third and mediums. But it's a weird box score to look at because you'll wake up this morning and go, man, Nebraska averaged nearly 9 yards per play, but yet you don't feel like, oh, wow, this is awesome. But probably if I would have said this to you last year, hey, Nebraska's going to win a game by 31 and they're going to average 8.8, you'd be like, oh my gosh, where can I sign up for this? Just an observation I'm making as I'm looking at the box score from last night, where Nebraska threw it more than they ran. They threw it 26 times, they ran it 22. And they ran with 8 different rushers, and they had 10 different receivers catch a pass. Wild box score.
No, it is. And I think that's where you can just glance at the statistics and not have to watch. I think by looking at your box score, you're going to say and see, all right, Northern Iowa really did milk the clock and hang on to the football. They wanted to play keep away, clearly, with the 37-minute time of possession number. But you just had these long drives. And you look at Northern Iowa's third down conversions. I mean, it wasn't 80%, but they were 6-16. I'm interested to get yards after contact the numbers. I'm interested to get missed tackle numbers from Nebraska's defense today. And I'm interested to get, what was the second down average? The thing that I needed to watch and see was just how did some of these 7 or 8 9-yard runs look for Northern Iowa, and they looked like, okay, at the point of attack, they're able to make contact and score through. So
it was leaky. That's how I define the Husker defense yesterday.
Yeah.
Leaky.
Yeah. Yes. Leaky's a perfect word.
But it wasn't.
They can tighten up.
Yeah, I missed tackles. I don't think is as glaring an issue anymore as it was the last 5 years.
No, it's even to be talking that would have been a top 5 tackling performance in previous Huskers.
I know. Yeah, I think that they've done a pretty good job of tightening that up through the first 3 games.
You're just not used to seeing missed tackles.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
they had a lot of instances of bad technique last night that you've not seen before.
But I think that's maybe symptomatic of just coming off the Colorado, the Rocky Mountain High, and just getting through UNI, and there was a little lull yesterday, and you get through it, you win by 31, and he's got their attention today. That the missed tackling the tackling wasn't as sure last night as we've seen in the first couple of games. And even last year, I think Nebraska was a pretty good tackling team. But boy, for 5 years, oh my God, or 10, it's been atrocious. The amount of missed tackles is just glaring. And now if there's one, it's like, oh, well, they missed a tackle there. It's not a bad thing. I mean, that's always a bad thing. It's not it's not something that I think is of the concern that they have to remedy it.
Well, to your point, Bill, you look at the entire body of work from this Husker defense, and I think you can go back to the last 6-7 games last year, really anything post Michigan last year, and you can say the tackling we saw last night was not the norm for this Husker defense. We saw great tackling at the end of last year. We've seen great tackling in the first 2 games this year. I've seen enough from this Husker defense to say that last night was an off night from the Husker defense. They weren't playing up to the standard in terms of tackling and in terms of intensity that we've come to expect from them. But you're going to have off days as a football team and as a defense. And if your off day is, you know what, you lost time of possession, they ran a whole lot of plays, but they only scored 3 points, it's a pretty damn good off day, you know?
Hey, you know who, let's give some, well, the defense gets a lot of discussion. Again, they gave up only 3 points last night. But there's 2 things about the defense. I think the schedule worked out really well for the defense. You play 2 spread teams, and then Northern Iowa is going to play a lot of 12 personnel, which you're going to see probably half the time in the Big Ten. There's some good offensive lines. Iowa has the top running back in terms of yardage now in the country. But I think Northern Iowa gave you a good test of lining up and just coming downhill at you. Northern Iowa's run game was not fancy last night, guys. They weren't trying to confuse you with inside or outside zone. They just said, we're going to line up in 12 personnel. We're going to hand it off to our 6'4", 235-pound running back, and he's going to be a bowling ball, and can you throw him in the gutter? But I want to give some love. So in the night where I thought guys were trying to make Sports Center tackles at times instead of the good technique of wrapping up, holding on, little gang tackling, can we give some love to 2 guys that probably are not the most flashy guys on defense, but man, do they do their job? John Bullock and Isaac Gifford. 2 Nebraska kids who they're just football guys. John Bullock is like in the right spot every single time, and he impacts the play even when he doesn't make the tackle. And last night, I think I'd have to go back in the Rolodex, but I think that's going to turn out to be one of Isaac Gifford's best games on defense. He was everywhere, and when he was there to make the stop, he made the stop.
No, Giff was money. Bullock, we were beating this up a little bit. How big's the gap between Bullock and Bayer and then the second unit linebackers? Not that they can't keep improving or getting better, but it's better with that second level with your starters. Ding, ding, ding. That's obvious. But quite honestly, it was Singleton and Giff making all the tackles, dude. It was Nebraska's safeties having to come up and fill that run support because there just wasn't a lot of TFLs, 3 total, no sacks. So that kind of lends to what Northern Iowa wanted to do with they're going to run it and occasionally they'll throw it. So moving on to Illinois, I'm just interested to see, what Nebraska can do. And if Illinois is going to play some man defense, guys, on Nebraska's wideouts, is Nebraska's wide receiver room rope-a-doping? Can they make a drastic quick jump into more consistency or more dominant play in week 4? Or are they what they are with some talent, some size, some skill, but some inconsistency? All right, say you're going to face teams that decide to lock down your wide receivers. Like Elijah pointed out, can Nebraska turn to the run game then and just wear them out running the football?
Why can't they? Let me jump in here real quick. Why can't they turn to what we saw last night? 29-24. A big part of that offense. I'm talking about the tight ends.
Yeah, no, that's a good take. I think you're muted, Big Cat.
You're correct. Those are your guys that you brought in to be man beaters. Like, the size of those 2 makes it difficult for a defensive back to match up with them. The speed of those 2 makes it difficult for a linebacker to match up with them. Those are the guys you brought in. Great game from Carter Nelson last night. Let's throw that out there. Credit to him. Great to see a Nebraska kid out there shining. He was fantastic. First touchdown, hits the Dougie afterwards. Love it. Those guys are your man beaters. And can you combine? That's what I think we talked about it week 1 whenever we discussed the role of Thomas Fidone within this offense, where we saw him going out to the flat, and we saw that again last night in the red zone whenever he gets knocked down or knocked out, I should say, at the 1 yard line. Is that a part of it to have those defensive backs flowing up, knowing that you're not going to have a linebacker have the speed to cover that guy, you're not going to have a defensive back? Does it open up things on the back end? Just, I guess, kind of asking blindly here, not asking for a response from any of you. I do see that, though, and I wonder what the game plan is going to be from Marcus Satterfield. As I talked about the counterpunch, what's the counterpunch going to be from Nebraska if they run up against a team that's playing a lot of man coverage?
I've been impressed with the way those guys are open. Fidone, granted, most of his catches it seemed to be in the flat, and finally on the other side of the line of scrimmage, not in the backfield. But rarely does Dylan Raiola have to throw into contested coverage with guys like Borkacher, Fidone, or even yesterday Carter Nelson on his play was absolutely wide open. It's pretty amazing the way those guys are able to find the spot on the field and really either be the primary target without contest or being a terrific safety valve if Banks or Nayor or Barney are covered. Well, I got to check all the way down, and I've got my tight end or my 8-man wide receiver running free. But I've been impressed with the way those guys have been free to make plays, and if they're not the primary target. So good on them for finding ways to get open. Fidone isn't nearly I don't want to say this wrongly. Carter Nelson, I think, has much more big play potential now that he's getting acclimated to more people on the field than maybe Fidone. Fidone's going to be your 8-yard guy, maybe 12, get you the first down. But Carter Nelson might be the one that breaks one, and he's going to catch a lot of defenses by surprise.
Let's talk about next week. Of course, Nebraska.
We don't want to talk. Hey, do we want to talk about Buschini's game last night?
Yeah, he got to eat hot dogs and watch the band. It was sweet.
Didn't they let him do a kickoff once or twice?
I don't know. Did they?
No.
I don't know.
He came on the field as a captain, and that was the only time he was on the field last night.
No puns last night.
He ate hot dogs and watched the game. He's just like me.
Yeah. He had a hell of a good Saturday night.
Hey,
He had his own reaction show.
Hey, Elijah, at the end of the day, he's not like one of us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cue up the Kendrick song.
Hey, that just went, hey, Elijah, you and I are together. The two that are in the top boxes.
No, I got it. I know what you did. You slid in the song title.
Dead people.
So here's the thing.
Womp, womp.
Nebraska, Illinois.
No, can I bring up one thing here? You're all into special teams. Hey, Ed Foley's son. Hold on for a moment.
Matt?
I think it was good to get Alvano out there. I keep that on your radar for next week. It was just good. They were essentially chip shots, and that's a confidence game. I don't think I can take much away, but at least he went out there and split the uprights. It wasn't knuckleballs or anything like that.
No.
Do we find it interesting that Hull was doing the extra points and Alvano was kicking?
No, Alvano kicked the whole time except for the last field goal by Hull, but they announced on Husker Vision before the game when they went through the starting lineup, and they very rarely announce the specialists. They announced the specialists last night, and they announced John Hull.
See, I saw that in the TV broadcast didn't make a point of it, but I thought, was that Hull out there on the extra point? So it was Alvano the entire night?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's interesting.
But I think it was good to get him out there. I'm not going to say that Nebraska's snapping issues or kicking is fixed, but he can wake up this morning and go, you know what? Okay, now we got a perfect record to build on. Let's go from there. Definitely, Nebraska's field goal kicking, as much as it's ridden the rails here, they're better than the FNBO kicker in the first quarter, who was over 3.
Well, we did have a question into our post-game show last night. Somebody called in and asked, I think it was Chuck called in and asked, that fourth down late in the first half, should he be concerned that Nebraska kept the offense out there as opposed to having some faith in the field goal kicker? My take was Matt Rule, if was asked about that, would probably defend it as, you know what, we only have so many opportunities to practice fourth downs. And against a live opponent, I should say, and you want to get that opportunity, and now that working now. But I don't think that should be swept under the rug.
Okay.
All I know is I would like to have heard Musburger or Michaels on the call when Holes point after snuck through the upright to make it a 31-point margin. I would love to have heard
There's some
that.
friends that we have that are very interested in
Back in the day when you had to be subtle about that stuff, and now it's just overt. Yeah, Van Pelt comes on. Well, they covered here. Back in the day, you had to be crafty.
The stadium, there were a lot of people that were very happy. I don't think, or John Hole maybe had 65,000 friends that were at the game last night. They were like, that's great. He made a field goal. Can I sneak one more thing in here? Because Elijah's point brought up something that I was curious. So the last pass that Raiola threw last night was the 50-50 ball that they had an interception. Were you guys surprised? And the game was in hand that they didn't send him out for at least one more series after the interception.
Yes.
Yeah, and on a positive.
I'll say no. One of the things that the radio broadcast made light of was Dylan Raiola, his mannerisms, I guess how he looked from the outside looking in whenever he came off to the sideline and had a conversation with Jalen Lloyd. And from what you heard on the radio broadcast, that it didn't seem like he was all that fazed. He was laughing and smiling and not too concerned with the interception. I think it comes down to what do you feel about your quarterback in that moment? And I didn't get a firsthand view of this, but from what the radio broadcast made it seem like, he didn't have a care in the world regarding that interception. And if that's your feel as a coaching staff, that you know what, I mean, interceptions are going to happen in football. And if your feel was he wasn't in his own head about throwing his first interception, I think you can be okay and just set him on the bench.
Yeah, not bad. You don't throw an interception in your college career until your 80th pass. And
that's huge.
And 3 straight games. This hasn't happened since Mariota as a true freshman. That you've had 3 straight games. Your first 3 games are 70% completion rate.
So I got to ask this before we kind of move on to Illinois and the weekend of college football. When do we hear or get a statement on Miroka? And how big is that for you guys to have him back?
I think it's really a substantial bit of news or from yesterday. Well, I guess there wasn't much news yesterday, but I think it's a big deal. Through the first couple of games, people had said he's their best offensive lineman. And then for him to not be out there for whatever the reason, I would assume that maybe I don't know if Matt Rule is moving everything up. Usually speaks to the press on Monday before a Saturday game. I didn't get a message this morning. They were having some type of press gathering today, but I would imagine Rule will address it quickly and won't bury it. And
brief with it yesterday.
Yeah, it was brief, but they'll whatever message they're going to send, I think that they will be forthcoming, and you may not hear much more after that. If he's with the team on Friday night, well, then maybe it was a 1-week thing. If he's not, then I think there's concern that somebody's better be working hard because Nebraska is going to need depth along that offensive line if their best guy's not out there anymore.
Yeah, I don't know if you wait till Friday. If he's not with Nebraska today or tomorrow, then I think there's a deeper discussion there.
Was he even on the sideline yesterday?
No.
I didn't think so.
He was not around the team. I mean, Rule was pretty quick. Coach's decision. Guys, when have you ever heard that out of a coach? Usually you can just BS with us and say, you know what, he wasn't, he was under the weather or he wasn't available. He said coach's decision. This isn't the NBA. In an NBA box score, it says did not play, coach's decision. Your starting right guard, who is your best run blocker and who has been coming off 2 good games, all of a sudden had to step back. This isn't new. Florida, he had issues at Florida. I hope that he can turn it around because Nebraska needs him. Now, Lutovsky played pretty well last night, but you like Miroka. And this is, the one thing that Bill was kind of alluding to. Whenever these kind of issues are simmering, Rule does a good job of addressing them and moving them on, and he doesn't let them linger. So maybe he says something tomorrow, but if he's not with them at practice today and tomorrow, then I wonder where we're going with where he's at with Nebraska.
How many times did we hear this offseason? Well, Mike has just got to figure out how we do things around here. How many times do we hear it this offseason? To your point, not a new issue with his previous stops. Not a new issue at Nebraska either.
And to wrap on this part of it, Rule isn't gonna jack with it. You with us or not, and you move on. Now,
I just want to point out that
he's damn good.
I want to point out that I can relate to coaches' decisions not playing, but I can.
Wow.
I understand that. So been there, done that.
Bill's looking at me saying, "Yeah, I can relate to Schmidt. You're not talking on today's show."
I looked at the roster when I was playing football. Coach's decision. I'm like, well, I'll just take my pads off. But anyway,
Yeah, the other thing to watch is, knock on wood, Nebraska through 3 games has stayed relatively healthy. And I think if it's Friday night, Butler would have played.
Yeah.
But they're just being cautious, and he was a little bit sore. But you got to watch him this week to make sure that he gets back out on the field, because he's a huge asset to Nebraska. But also, with that said, guys, Nebraska's backups, that second string defense, man, they look comfortable. They didn't miss a beat, and they played a lot of guys on defense. That front 7, they rotated a lot of guys when the game was still, there were meaningful snaps to be played.
Guys, let's take a look here at the Big Ten here before we say goodbye, as we round into another. Do we just call this Kegs and Eggs edition? The 10:30 starts.
Kegs and Eggs in football, is that trademarked?
Well, it might be. The Oregon flex job was real, as was Notre Dame's. Wisconsin is still putting ice on different parts of their body because it still hurts this morning. And Michigan kind of slept-walked through Arkansas State. Michigan's got a real problem on offense. Washington State, the old Cougs, get it done in Seattle.
Hey, how about their troll job?
That was hilarious.
Yeah. How about Schmidt's dog drinking out of the bowl right now?
It's not mine.
It's Elijah's dog. Hey, give your dog some water, man. The dog sounds like it's parched. Did it eat the bowl?
That's just her. You should see the amount of water she spreads around whenever she drinks water. It is impressive.
Shock. Cool that you own a St. Bernard.
What do you think of Indiana? What do you think of Indiana? Their win, 42-13 at UCLA.
UCLA is worse than I thought, and I thought they were one of the worst teams in the league. Yeah. But also, Indiana made a really good hire. Yeah. Signetti just wins. And Curtis O'Rourke looks good at quarterback. Mm-hmm. He looks comfortable.
Mobile a little bit too.
If you guys want to look ahead, could Nebraska and Indiana be both unbeaten when they meet in Bloomington?
Yeah, they both should be.
Be a lot of red there.
Mm-hmm.
I think Signetti is brash. There's no question. What did he say? This is what we do. We go to old houses and kick their ass. Something like that. The way UCLA is going, Tony White might get another shot at that job rather than later.
Not as chimes in. Indiana's coach may be psychotic.
I mean, he's kind of fun. I'll give you that.
But don't you have to have, if you're a place like Indiana that's not known for football, isn't it okay to have a psychotic winning coach?
I'm amused by the guy.
Oh,
I'm amused by him.
He's fun. Look at if you saw him like last year on game day when they went to JMU. It's like Indiana put money into their NIL. They hired a coach he just wins. Like wherever he goes. That's what this conference needs. They don't need Ryan Walters, nice guy. They need, if you're going to be at the bottom of the league, you're at the bottom of the league and you have an entertaining coach. Look at Bielema. They were at the bottom of the league. Bielema's kind of entertaining, and they're I don't know where you'd rank Illinois as we kind of shift into talking about next week. I don't know, was Illinois in the top 9 right now in the Big Ten?
Right now, because of their record, they beat Kansas. But are they
lost to UNLV?
UNLV's pretty good.
Yeah, Barry Odom's pretty good coach.
Yeah. I mean, UNLV's unbeaten. So you've got...
Can I say one more thing about Signetti? Do you not get kind of a Pat Fitzgerald feel off of Kurt Signetti? He's got more juice, probably a little bit more psychotic, but in terms of like he might just have that trait of people want to play for him. That's what Pat Fitzgerald had going for him at Northwestern. Is everyone on that Northwestern team wanted to play for him. He had that locker room. I had the same feel early in the tenure of Cignetti, just that he might be the right man for the job for a program that's hard to win at, simply because he's got that juice that from the outside looking in, I don't play football anymore, but man, I'd love to play for that guy.
So your games next week, USC heads to Michigan. How about getting destroyed twice in the same month if you're Michigan? Because you got dirt rolled earlier in the year. You have Clemson and NC State. UCLA gets to go to LSU next week. Oklahoma takes on Tennessee. Tennessee heads to Norman. Vandy and Missouri is all right. Boston College, Michigan State. And then Kansas State goes to the land of no alcohol, tobacco, but plenty of firearms. BYU.
You guys should watch Mormon Wives. It'll blow your mind.
Hold on. I have gotten a couple of texts about it. Is it a reality show?
Yes.
What's it on?
Hulu.
Okay.
I thought you were gonna say, what's it about?
No, I got that part.
You did that very sheepishly. Okay. You go, soft swinger.
That's pretty good. Sharpies. We need more recommendations for Sharpie.
No, that's not like I'm gonna watch it.
Well, right now it's
catching up on
a
everything.
marathon of Jersey housewives.
Gary doesn't need to watch Mormon Wives. He sees enough Mormon Wives in his daily life.
Thank you. Love you.
That's pretty good. Wow.
I've never
with that.
Sorry, Bill.
Well, I was just going to say, if we're going to talk soap operas, what about these soap operas that is real bad football of South of Florida, of the Sunshine State? I guess that could be a reality show.
There we go.
With Florida and Billy Napier and Florida State and Mike Norvell, and Miami's doing okay, but I mean for Florida and Florida State, and if you're trying to, maybe Florida State's plan is to be so bad that the ACC will kick them out of the conference and they can go join the brand new six-pack. And Clemson could go with them, and Stanford and Cal can go back, and then you'd have 10 teams in the Pac Mountain, whatever it is out there. But Florida State and Florida are in an awful world of hurt right now. And if they leave, and if Stanford and Cal go back to whatever the Pac-12 is, what happens to the ACC? I mean, this is really interesting, again, off the field kind of stuff that's kind of come back to the forefront this week because of the Pac-2's move.
I want to ask this question.
And Florida State's sucking.
Well, listen, Norvell went unbeaten last year, so I don't know unless he's over. If the over gets extended, then maybe they talk. But with Florida, Sharpie, I know you're locked in down there. Does Florida make a move on old Billy Ball sooner rather than later to get a head start? And you hate saying this, but it's the reality down there. Do they look at the Big Ten?
Well, you're thinking about the guy at IU. You're thinking Cignetti or the OC at Ohio State.
I'm saying, is James Franklin trying to still get out of Happy Valley?
Well, his agent will get him involved. I mean, your first call is going to be to Jimmy Sexton and go, what client do you have that would be interested?
PJ Fleck wants to get out.
Oh, yeah. So
he ain't going anywhere.
Hey, you didn't include this. I know we are all over the place, but this is what makes this show so great because we can do this. The battle for the Floyd of Rosedale next week is very interesting, where Iowa is and where Minnesota is right now. Put that game on your radar. And we have all day Saturday to watch it because we don't have a game to worry about because awesome. Nebraska football hates high school football in the state and they play on Friday.
But back to
Fox. Back to the
Fox that hates high school football.
Okay, so maybe it's not Nebraska football. There will be a high school football game in Memorial Stadium next Saturday. So at Florida, the top boosters are called the Bull Gators. And they are the $1 million boosters. They have gotten enough of them together to put the 26 mil together to say goodbye to Billy Napier. Now, I'm going to call him later today and say, I would take 26 million not to work, but they've got to find somebody that can compete with Kirby Smart, because when Mark Richt moved on, Georgia moved on from Mark Richt, and Kirby Smart came in, Florida started to really drop, and they need somebody very dynamic. You know, Billy Napier was a good coach, but he's not a good coach at the Power 4 level. They need somebody dynamic. So I think they move on. His reluctance to just have legway when your job's on the line, say, this is our future. Hey, I was able to get this guy in recruiting and not play him as a starter like yesterday, and you get beat by a backup. You're in a gots-to-go situation.
Doesn't it make you appreciative of how Matt Rule handled bringing in a 5-star quarterback, where you say thanks but no thanks on Kyle McCord? You don't look elsewhere in the portal. You don't bring in that proven option. Look at the drama at Florida with all the fans calling for Lagway, and Mertz continuously gets starts for this Florida football team. There's a disconnect there, and it makes me appreciative of how Matt Rule handled Dylan Raiola bringing him, saying, you know what, we're putting all our eggs in one basket. You're our guy, because Florida didn't do the same.
Anonymous has Lane Kiffin. That'll be one, but it'll be all
NIL's nuts. It'll miss.
Yeah. So they'll have options, but guys, it's not the sexiest job out there. Okay.
No.
The facilities have improved, but they're still behind, believe it or not. That shows you Urban Meyer worked his magic. You know, they had a thing rolling and they were bringing in dudes and they were just winning. They had crappy facilities. I once went in the football office and it looked like the old the paneling on the wall that we all had in our house when, in the 80s. So they're a little bit behind. They picked it up a little bit. And you got an athletic director that now has burned through some coaches and bad decisions. So it's not the most appealing job. But I had a friend of mine who he's not a Bull Gator, but he is a big Florida supporter. He thought if Napier could just get to 5, because Ben Sass was out and they wouldn't have a new president in before the end of the football season, they didn't want to put that on the plate of a new president. Hey, you got to fire your football coach. That if he got to 5, you'd save his job. But now it's too late. People aren't going to the games. Okay. They're not in the stadium. Mike Norvell is safe, but I think you got to look at Norvell, because this isn't the first time that they have started the year with a big old 0 in the first couple of games.
Twice.
He's safe there, but he'll have to make some changes. I think what it all comes back to, and I look on them, and I'm going to bring Nebraska's situation into this. And and I'm looking at Nebraska. This is elsewhere of really good programs, because I'm looking at Fickle as well. Man, we need to start talking more about the part of the head coach that is the CEO that knows how to hire the right people for the magnitude of that job. Billy Napier has a bad staff, guys that should not be coaching in the SEC. Luke Fickle made a mistake with an OC, made a mistake with a couple of position coaches. He's tried to rectify that in the offseason. Matt Rule appears, and I know it's early, but man, they haven't missed a beat, hired the right guys for the magnitude of the situation and where they're at. And you look at programs that are struggling, I'm going to start looking at their assistant coaches and going, man, is Mr. Wackadoodle your quarterback coach compared to a Glenn Thomas, for example?
Does Tony White come up at all for a Florida job? Is that a question to have?
Well,
I know he's not a Florida guy, but
I think the question is who's the next hot coordinator? Because Kirby was an assistant, goes to Georgia. Dan Lanning, an assistant, goes to Oregon. Ryan Day was an assistant, got the Ohio State job. So is there an assistant? And Tony White's name is hot. It was last year. It'll be hot again this year. And I think he was wise to come back and wait for something to open up. They already want to get rid of Jeff Lebby at Mississippi State after he was coveted going to Oklahoma, coming back. And then they lose to – who'd they lose to? Toledo yesterday?
Yeah,
I mean, and granted, that's Mississippi State and not Florida or one of those other major jobs. But who's the next hot assistant coach, coordinator that is ready to make that move? And it can't be like a Billy Napier goes from Louisiana, head coach at Louisiana. Is that a better launching pad than being an offensive coordinator at a major program? And based on recent track record for the jobs I mentioned, it's probably better to be a top assistant at a major program to go to another major program. Napier would be the example that you don't want to go that route again.
Also, let's don't push Tony White out the door after this year. And I'm not saying push him out the door, but can you guys kind of see where I'm going?
Yeah.
I don't think it's a slam dunk that Tony White, who, basically if the UCLA NIL situation was better, he would be the head coach at his alma mater. Mm-hmm. That really turned him off. And he's looked at what Nebraska's done with their NIL, and he understands that portion. And he can be choosy because it's good right now to be the DC at Nebraska. You're paid really well. You like the guy you're working for. And even though if you look ahead to next year's defense, they're not going to be as old, they will be faster. Okay. And they will be able to do some things that you can't do with this defense. So even though Tony White will be a hot candidate, I'm not ready to go, boom, he's gone after this year, because he's going to be able to play himself into situations where he can be choosy. But isn't it nice to have, whether, I don't know, maybe nice is not the right word, where Nebraska finally has an assistant coach that people covet, that they want, that is like a hot assistant coach. That is a head coach is what you want to do. You groom people for their next step in their coaching career, and they're getting that next job because they're really good working under you.
No, the words ring true from Rule to White about taking the right job. Don't take a bad job, because it's just setting you up. There's a lot of dominoes, and I know he's just got to Washington with Fish, and we all think he's a pretty damn good coach, but tough one last night against your rival. But Fish has got some Florida background. Does Washington, that'd be a job you leave for?
Oh my gosh! If that guy went from Arizona to Washington to Florida in about the span of 3 or 4 years.
But I'm saying, if I'm Washington, I call Tony White.
No.
If I'm Florida, I'm not sure I'd call Fish after losing to Washington State yesterday.
It might be a little early. Let's get game balls, because there's NFL gambling to do.
Also reminded in the stream, Florida Mississippi State play next weekend.
Okay.
Mike, that's where game day should be.
You want ours?
Wait, can I just say that Florida State game might be streaming exclusively on those little TVs at the gas pumps?
Oh, nice.
No one's going to care about that one.
That's a good call. Sharpie game ball goes to who?
Oh, Ja'Cory Barney,
Okay.
Carter Nelson, and the other freshman that played last night and did not look like freshmen.
Okay, I like it. Bill Doleman.
Well, again, I go back to a whole getting over the 30.5. Buschini for, dressing nice and not having to do anything. Game ball. I go back to what Gary said with Bullock and Gifford. Man, I love watching them play in the linebacker spots and safety, all that stuff. They're just all over the place. So those would be the two guys I really enjoyed watching last night.
Elijah, got a game ball?
Dylan Raiola.
Okay.
It's got to. Great game. We talked about the man coverage in the second half. I think you're going to need to work on that, but he was damn near flawless in that first half, picking apart zone coverages. Got to go to Dylan Raiola. He was the best player on the field last night, in my opinion.
Okay. I'm going to defensively, I think I just got to go Ty Robinson for a second straight week. His impact is felt, his energy is big time, and he kept it going on that defensive line, and he's always wearing his hard hat. He's ready to go to work. So I'm going to give Robinson my game ball. He just does a lot, and it may not show up on the stat sheet all the time, but he's a real one, man. So fellas, we'll check in midweek and get you ready for Nebraska, Illinois. And we ask you to subscribe and tell a buddy about the Average Joe Sports Show on YouTube and on Spotify and iTunes. Like and subscribe. Give us a rating, and we appreciate that. That is Gary Sharp. That is Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Have yourself a great Sunday football fun day, and back at you next time with the Average Joe Sports Show.